Hello there. Thanks for tuning in to your favorite news destination. You're watching In Your Interest with me, Kabir Naqvi. We've got two segments for you, both pertaining to the Northeast. Our first one is about the racism that continues to live on in everyday India. They're Indian by passport, but treated like an outsider via their perception in their own country. Another shocking case of racism that's now been caught on camera. They're Indian, like I mentioned, by passport, but they're treated like outsiders. This is their own country, and they travel for work, for dreams, for opportunity, but end up being asked to prove their identity. Is this ignorance, or is this racism that just refuses to die? And what is it that we can actually do here? Now, the visuals are certainly disturbing. A dance troupe from Arunachal Pradesh at a railway station in Patna, denied access to a washroom, asked to show identification and ID cards, and when they resisted, abused with slurs that can't and shouldn't even be repeated on air. All of it caught on camera. Now, what began as a simple request turned
what they understood of a boy who wanted to have a samosa at a sweet shop, and therefore see him as somebody who does not belong here, and then a strong voice or a strong assertion is taken as an insult. So this is another. Then again, this Dehradun case of momo cases or chinki cases, this is another parochial exposure, and then the mindset, because for a northeastern person to be limited to the extent of your features, let's say the eyes, or maybe of a food to the extent of your exposure. For example, in the case of the Malvinagar case, the lady who passed those racial remarks, she's exposed to maybe certain girls from the Northeast who might be working in the services sector. This is one. So therefore, the stereotypes and then the generalization that takes place. In the 2014 case of the Arunachal boy who was killed, Tanya, that fellow, Animal's son, that is also limited to an exposure of what they understood of a boy who wanted to have a samosa at a sweet shop, and therefore see him as somebody who does not belong here, and then a strong voice or a strong assertion is taken as an insult. So this is another. Then again, this Dehradun case of momo cases or chinki cases, this is another parochial exposure, and then the mindset, because for a northeastern person to be limited to the extent of your features, let's say the eyes, or maybe of a food culture which is not necessarily yours. A Naga food is very diverse. A Manipuri food is very diverse.
Yep,
It is
yep.
very rich as well. But when you bring it down to a idea of identity on Momo, this calls for a certain concern of attacking of your dignity, and therefore the reaction, which is a very hostile
No,
construction of
absolutely.
China,
Whatever we've
because
seen at the
China is
Patna
a mini
junction
state.
is
Exactly.
abhorrently shameful. Let's begin
Exactly.
at that point. It's
Right.
abhorrently shameful.
Yes. Should I continue?
Yeah. Please, please.
But then on the other side, we have lots of migrants in the northeastern part. In Mizoram and all these places, we may use the term Vai, which simply means foreigner, right? And there is no such things whereby a person will be judged purely on the ground of color or facial features. But usually in the Northeast, a person's status is determined by his character. There is dignity of labor, there is dignity of gender. So therefore, that judgment which affect their dignity never happens in the northeastern part of
Yeah.
India. So we have migrants, we see them, we allow them to navigate, we see their character, and then we say that this person is a hardworking man. He might be running a salon, he might be running a small grocery shop, he might be running errand for supply of goods and all that. They live and they thrive, they're happy. But in Bihar and all these public places, the sudden explosion and limiting a person to a facial features of the eye, or a construction of a food, or maybe an idea of hostile termination of China would cause an explosion, and therefore there's no time to navigate. And the moment there's a
That's a fair
reaction, the
assessment.
response is very strong. Yeah.
That's a fair point, Dr. Toming. You know,
Right.
and assessment of character by any margin is a better standard to understand where a
Exactly.
person actually comes from. You know, Ninglun Hanga, incidents like these often go viral. We've seen it time and again on social media as well. But for many from the Northeast, this is not new. There's a pattern at play. And it's sad that there is a pattern that still exists. How widespread is this really? You know, give us an understanding of, you know, your perspective to the viewers. How widespread is this in everyday experiences of being treated as the outsider? Shameful, once again, in your own country, from housing discrimination to casual slurs that Dr. Tombing was pointing out. What are some of the most common forms of bias that Northeasterners have to face in 2026 even?
Yes, it's very unfortunate because this kind of news have been coming in after every interval. Like, especially this kind of incidents have been reported since 2000 mostly.
Yeah.
That shows that even the Northeast people have also started traveling outside the region for work, for studies, or for whatever, even for as a tourist. So once this encounter started, and even the mainland Indians, the so-called other parts of Indian state have a little bit of a shock reactions is there. And for the Northeasterners, we people are also quite sensitive, so to say, when you are asked about your identity card, for example.
Certainly.
Quite sensitive, politically very sensitive
Yep.
reason. So the reaction often, they immediately reacts, for example, especially with boys, for example, with younger generations. And it is something to do with insensitivity also in with the general, the mainland or the other parts of the states. Sensitivity in the sense, for example, if some the other person is hanging around your neighborhood or living around your neighborhood, maybe you could have treated them a little bit more with sensitivity, for example. And like you said, you rightly said about the mindset that is there. And another thing is, since there is more and more encounter between the Northeast region and the mainland India, this kind of incidents may also be frequently happening in future as well. That is what I say.
Yep.
So, on the other hand, the Indian society at large is also very much divided along caste lines. And unfortunately, the Northeast region people are seen as sort of the people from the lower strata. So that kind of a sense of looking them down, and of course they do come to work in some kind of a service sector, which is considered a lower job or something. Of course, there are many other Northeastern people working in collar jobs and high flying or many other respected jobs, but mostly they are seen in that category.
Yeah, Mr. Hangal, you're absolutely right. I mean, I'm trying to understand, people from Northeast must feel that their concerns aren't being taken seriously, because whenever such incidents happen, like you rightly pointed out, in very frequent intervals, there is outrage for a few days and then there is abhorrent silence right after. People just simply forget about it. Life just keeps on moving and you just forget about it. So what's your message to the enforcement? What's your message to the central government?
One thing which I noticed in recent time is that, for example, boys are fighting. For example, these are happening in public places.
Yeah.
And they're bystanders. And nobody tries to help or nobody tries to douse the fight, for example. Nobody is intervening.
Yeah.
That is something very alarming. For example, even in Northeast, there are fights on the streets. Drunken fights or boys fighting, group fights, for example. And elders come out and try to
placate both parties. Yeah.
For example, this is not happening.
Yeah.
So, for example,
it's the day and age of social media, ma'am. Who can you blame? This is agnostic to one particular community. This happens across the board. People are more busy video recording the entire tussle than coming out and helping them out. I'm going to come back to you. Dr. Vageshwari Deshwal, Professor, Faculty of Law, University of Delhi, also with us. Dr. Deshwal, the Constitution clearly guarantees equality. It prohibits discrimination. Why in 2026 we're still seeing such blatant violations, that too in public spaces? Many argue that the existing laws, like provisions in the IPC, the provisions in the BNS, they're just too broad, they're too vague and don't specifically address racism. And I think it's time we change all of that.
See, I'll tell you, in India, as it is, we are broadly divided amongst Aryans and Dravidans. So when we enacted our constitution, this was beyond our contemplation that something of this sort could also crop up. So we have one provision in the constitution which forbids racial discrimination. We have Article 14 which says that there will be equality for everyone.
Yeah.
But then this is something which has gained a lot of traction in, I would say, the last 20-25 years, when we've started witnessing these kind of things, wherein our fellow Indians, they are being abused, harassed, they are being compelled to show their identity or prove that, no, you are also Indians. Okay, now, see, university where I teach, Delhi University, we have specially enacted these Northeast cells. We have these cells for students from the Northeast region of the country, and we undertake programs regularly for sensitization, for telling people that, see, in case there is any such kind of a discrimination, there are many STs also in the Northeast.
Yep.
So those students, they are, time and again, we tell them that, see, there is also this ST Prevention of Atrocities Act. You can always complain against any sort of a discrimination that you face under the law. You can go to the NHRC, you can just simply come to the teachers, and we have a grievance redressal cell and specifically dedicated towards redressal of any complaints that we come across from Northeast students. See, India is a signatory to International Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination. That is a very old convention. In 1968 itself we signed it. But still it is very unfortunate why till date we have not enacted any specific legislation. Yeah. We had one single provision in the Indian Penal Code. Now we have reproduced in the BNS in the form of section 196, and we've also made a very nice addition to that. And what is that? Initially, this was about promoting enmity between groups on the grounds of religion, race, and all. And we were like, whether it is by verbal expressions, by gestures, by written communication, and now we say any form of communication, because we've seen that online trolling is something which we are all witnessing. And it's not that it is happening only against people coming from the northeast region of our country. So any kind of trolling that is happening, whether online or by any other medium, now we have this provision which is covering this also. Now we also talk about hate crimes which are specifically taking place against people coming from the northeast region. There were earlier instances wherein such people, they would be subjected to extreme violence and sometimes lynching also. So now we have also introduced a provision in the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita in provision relating to punishment for murder. What we've done, we've introduced the concept of joint liability. So now wherever there are 5 or more than 5 people, and if with a common objective, they racially abuse a person or they lynch a person, if that is done by a mob consisting of 5 or more persons, which result in the death of that person. Either they kill the person themselves, even if they create such circumstances that the person goes in depression or commits suicide or any such kind of a thing. So then we've got extremely harsh punishments for that.
But it seems like enforcement is a little lapse, Dr. Deshwal. There's a little problem. There's clear-cut gaps when it comes to the enforcement. And I'm going to come back to you because there's a Base Barua committee proposals and recommendations that have still not been implemented. Dr. Tombing, would you like to throw some light on that? The Base Barua committee that recommended specific anti-racism provisions, that this happened years ago, but many of them still pending. A dedicated anti-racism law is all but essential in 2026.
Yes, this Bisbarua committee report came up from the Nido Tania case, where an MLA's son got killed. And it recommended that the penal provision should be also updated and also be made more stringent. But this is at the ideal level of the law. That's what it is. For example, whatever Professor Madam has just said, if we implement those sections of Section 196, 197 properly, would be able to, in fact, maybe prosecute the perpetrator. The problem also is that at institutional level, like BU, or maybe in banking institution, or maybe any other public sector institution, or corporate sectors, where there is a proper institution there, the framework is easier to be applied. Now, the concern is of the open spaces. For example, the Arunachal influencers. Now, the unique case of Arunachal Pradesh influencer is that since they have a lingua language of Hindi, so when they make reels and then they are on social media, because of their peculiar nature of the way they speak Hindi, they have traction across India, and therefore they will have good followers. So that way they can up their market as well. But the problem is that when they are exposed to a public platform like the railway platform, it is people are always in motion, people are always moving, and suddenly 1 or 2 person comes up and say some slur that actually takes away the entire structure or framework which we might have worked on it. And another context is that it is not an everyday phenomenon, and also context is that if that person is from Bihar and from around that region, for the law enforcement agency, said or unsaid, implied or otherwise, he might be thinking that my community affiliation is rather with this particular person. This is one part of it. Another context is that the Fraternity of India, how it works is the one who has recorded the video, filmed it, is maybe from Bihar again. So we always have these two factors always going hand in hand. One is someone who empathizes, who understands that this is not right. The other person is totally ignorant, and in that excitement of maybe not understanding.
That's a credible point, Dr. Tombing, because a lot of empathy that's been shown on the internet as well. A lot of empathizers on the internet.
Right? Yeah, and then the explosion, everything. And how do you go after that? How do you pursue the matter after that? Because it's always a transitioning community. One person learns, the other person comes in, and then he has no exposure. The parochial mindset sets in, and then the slur comes back, and then everything that we have done is brought down to a nullity. But at institutional level, you can have the proper framework. And I must thank Madam there. I'm a DU student. I was a DU student. When I got my admission in Faculty of Law, one of our faculty at that time was Dr. Jasmine. She said that our Northeastern students, we have to be a little patient with them with regard to filling of form because of these other cultural things. And that
Yeah.
made me really comfortable. That's what it is. And when I started working in Faculty of Law, I have Madam and others who were always there supporting
Many
me.
thanks, Dr. Tombing,
That's how you
for,
deal
for
with
sharing
different-
that personal anecdote. You're absolutely right. And just like, Dr. Deshwal pointed out, that there are special Northeastern cells. I think that's something that should come up in all those universities. It's about tolerance. It's about acceptance of the other. And that's where the mindset issue comes across. I'm going to come to Dr. Deshwal on that front. But before that, Mrs. Hanga, finally, what would meaningful change look like from your perspective, ma'am? Is it going to be stricter laws? Is it going to be better awareness? Or is it simply more representation, more visibility? What's going to be a final meaningful change?
Yeah, there can be no one direct approach. No, it has to be a multi-pronged. In the
Okay.
sense, we need the law also. We need awareness and other things. And one thing which I feel is if we can have some kind of more sensitization in schools, with in high schools and especially in the school level, in across the states and in different parts of the country.
Yeah.
Like for example, when we were small, we have this subject social studies, for example. So in that kind of schools, or maybe you can have a separate kind of one syllabus where you can, when the teacher can do some kind of awareness interaction with the students. So that would be quite helpful. That is what I feel.
Okay. Dr. Deshwal, the final word to you. We've spoken about all the important aspects, but that stereotyping, that mindset issue, you're a DU professor yourself. Dr. Tombing was a DU student, and we all know the kind of students, the amount of number of students that come from the Northeast to study in the Delhi University, in the entire campus, the North or the South campus, their dreams of making it big in mainstream India. This mindset issue, how do we really solve this? How do we address the deeper problem of this stereotyping and othering, Professor?
See, there are 2 points. First, when Tombing said that within institutions it is okay, but the problem is when we talk about protecting people in open spaces.
Yep.
Okay, so how can those open spaces be policed? Then, as Madam Hangal said, that we need to maybe start sensitization from the school level. So I believe it is equally important to catch them young. See, we are telling our children, we are trying to educate them about the concept of consent, because we understood that sexual abuse, molestation, now these are also inherent problems. So we are trying to tell our children since childhood that, see, what is consent, what is the proxemics, okay? It's a science dealing with spaces around people. At the same time, we also need to tell them to be sensitive when we talk about national integration. These are things about which from the very early stages of school they need to be taught about. Okay, then there are multiple reasons. Some of these are which are contributing to this harassment is that the media is to a large scale responsible for that. These cultural differences, the way sometimes they are being highlighted in the media and in these what we call as on social media.
Yeah.
Anyone can take to social media, create reels, spreading these kind of stereotyping. And what is further another very concerning thing is that of scapegoating. See, we need to understand these power matrix and these power imbalances. The people from Northeast here, they are in minority. Okay, majority are people from neighboring states, if we talk particularly about Delhi. So we have people coming from Haryana, coming from Uttar Pradesh, coming from Bihar. I mean, physically, from their facial features, they are a lot different than people from Northeast. See, and I also tell you that it's not only that they are looked down upon. People, sometimes they envy. Because people from Northeast, they have a very fair complexion. Generally, they are well versed in English. Okay, and then we've seen that there's a lot of sports culture also over there.
Yeah.
So sometimes when you are not able to put them down in
Let's
some
not forget
area,
music, Professor. Let's
you
not
try
forget
to
music.
target.
I mean, I think all of my Northeastern friends are pretty handy with the guitar.
Exactly, exactly. So sometimes when you feel that you cannot measure up to them in certain areas, so then
Yeah.
you try to look for areas where you can put them down. So this is what I believe we need to be talking more. We need to normalize conversations around these things in classrooms, from school, then in colleges, everywhere, so that people know, and in media also. As I told you, the laws that we have, they are too little and too late.
Too
And that
little,
is
too
because
late.
we've never paid attention to this area. Something which now, definitely, I believe programs like these will attract
That's the idea.
attention
That's
of
the
our
idea,
audience.
Professor. That's the idea. The important thing is, and I'm trying to do my little bit of, at least initiating that conversation, to be not shying away from that conversation. And many thanks for joining us here, Mrs. Hangal, Dr. Tombing, Dr. Deshwal, for taking out the time and, helping the viewers really understand what it means from your perspective, this stereotyping, this othering, how can this actually be curbed and stopped? It's a little too late and little too less. That's the problem that we're dealing with. Laws, they continue to exist on paper, but dignity cannot be legislated unless our mindsets continue to change. So, in your interest, here's the question. Will India really confront this reality, because this is happening again and again, this pattern at play, or do we continue to normalize racism just like we saw in that flashpoint on Patna Junction? A question that all of us need to look inside our collars and find an answer to. We're going to slip into a quick commercial breather here. Our second segment on politics in the Northeast. This is about Guwahati and Assam, where Chief Minister Himanta Biswa Sarma's wife's passports versus Congress and the war of words. What does that essentially mean? Is there any fact in that, or is that just political mudslinging that's coming right on the other side? Don't worry.